Who's going to be the Uber to your taxi company? Like, what does that look like? That's going to be completely disruptive to the way you operate. And if you know it, why aren't you building it? If you don't know it, you better figure it out. That I thought was just brilliant. If you keep that mindset when you're building a business of who would disrupt me, what would that look like, and we should build it. And we've done that. So we have our venture fund now where we fund a lot of marketing tech and e-com tech, but to be a partner to them and benefit from the growth. And we constantly look at what are other things that could be disruptive that we could just be a partner in or do.
Welcome to Entrepreneur's Handbook Podcast, where we tell inspiring startup stories with practical takeaways for you, the listener. Today's guest is Erik Huberman. He's the founder and CEO of Hawke Media and the author of the Hawke Method. His company is valued at over 150 million and is the fastest growing marketing agency in the United States. He's worked with over 3,500 brands, including Red Bull and Verizon. His entrepreneurship journey actually started earlier than this, and he founded and sold 2 e-commerce businesses by the time he was 26. As a serial entrepreneur, Erik has received many accolades such as Forbes 30 Under 30 and Inc. magazine's Top 25 Marketing Influencers. You're about to learn marketing tips from one of the best. Welcome to Entrepreneur's Handbook, Erik. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So what we always start with and what we love to hear from our guests is what got you into entrepreneurship in the first place? What took you down this path?
Yeah, I'd say it's really family and circumstance. Like I like to not, I feel like so many entrepreneurs shy away from the fact that like how you're brought up is a huge factor. Like, no, I did this all myself. And it's like, no, I mean, my grandfather and my father were entrepreneurs. And so in the literal sense of the phrase, I took it for granted. Like, it was just like, listen, like they ran businesses, so I'll probably run a business or do my own thing at some point in my life. And I just thought that from a very young age that I never shied away from getting a job. Like, the word entrepreneur wasn't a big word until much later in my career. And so early on, it was just like, I'll probably go learn things from other companies and then eventually I'll start my own.
Yeah. And what was that first company you started? How was that first transition?
Yeah, I mean, there was small little like hustles when I was a kid. I bought and sold Beanie Babies when I was 8 years old and like did things like that. And I tried to start an online music company when I was 12, but my dad wouldn't sign the seller's permit and like all these other random things that I did. But my first, I'd say, legitimate company was when I was a junior in college. A friend of mine called me and California passed a law that you had to filter storm drains, or it was like a $70,000 fine per drain to the person that owned the property. He discovered this law. And he was a surfer. He cared about runoff management, water runoff. And so he wanted to fix this, but he had no sales or marketing background. I always had a knack for sales and marketing. And so I jumped in with him as a co-founder and helped him build it. And yeah, basically got us our first customers. I played lawyer and like figured out how to like build a legitimate business for the first time. That was when I was about 20 years old.
And was that full time at that time, or was it something you were doing on the side?
It was actually the summer between my junior and senior year of college. I was debating whether I would go back to college or not. This was also like right after Facebook had launched and he dropped out of Harvard and like the dropout culture had started to become a thing. And this felt like a really good opportunity. But after 3 months of doing it, it was, do I go back and finish school or do I want to really dive into being storm drain maintenance or stormwater maintenance company was the name of the company. And I decided to go back to school and leave him the company. And I actually, I had half of it and said, don't worry about it, keep the company. And he turned it into a multi-million-dollar business. It actually wasn't because I didn't think it was going to be successful. It was because my passion wasn't really there. And my goal during college and the jobs that I got, and even during my 20s, was to learn. And I wanted to take the job that I would learn the most with. And that at the time learned a lot building that business, or starting that business. But I wanted to go finish school and not necessarily double down on that.
Yeah, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs will say that education isn't so important. So I find it interesting that you had that fork in the road and you chose to go into education. And do you think that was the right choice for you and you don't have any regrets with that? Not
at all. It's funny, I've never really reflected on this, but a lot of the decisions I've made in my career have been, what am I passionate about? And that's like the grandiose way of saying, what sounds fun? What's enjoyable? And I didn't see myself, I wasn't excited about continuing to build a business around filtering storm drains, but I was excited about getting back to school and finishing and figuring out what I was going to do with the rest of my life. Like, all that was exciting to me, and it wasn't going to be this. And so just being real with myself of what I want to do. Now, there's a huge amount of luck involved in that what you're wanting to do matching up with what actually makes you money and makes you successful. But in this case, it worked out in that sense. And, that was actually what was funny is right after that, I graduated a year later, or I guess it'd be like 9 months later. And I went into real estate as a commercial real estate agent because real estate had always been really interesting to me. And I started it at a brokerage 1 week to the day before the entire banking industry collapsed in 2008 and made $350 that year. And again, back to like circumstance, like that forced me to relook at what I was going to do. Because at that point, my vision was I was going to, work in real estate for a few years, make enough money to start buying my own real estate and start to stack it. And I'd make cash flow from being an agent, but then I'd invest in my own. And over time, that cash flow from the investments would pass. Like this was my whole theory at 21 years old, which a lot of people have run that playbook, just to be clear. It wasn't anything that creative. But then in 2008, I made $350 that year and went and living in LA and went into a ton of debt and went, this is not going to work. And so, but I had built enough. I think there were two factors early on. One being kind of my upbringing between both. I went to a really alternative, like hippie school founded by an Indian philosopher that was very anti-authority. And so like all our teachers were called by their first names. You were taught to question everything. And so I never had this, like, I don't want to say it's fear, but like people have this view of leadership and view of success as if it's like completely intangible. And, I've sat, even as a young kid, I would sit in the room with billionaires or whatever it was, like when I was starting out and I'd get into the right rooms. And I never looked at them as like anything above me. It was like, yeah, you've had some success. Good for you. You're a lucky guy and you probably did some smart things or girl. That's all I looked at it as. So I never had this big thing. So that combined with I had already tried the stormwater business and I had some other little side hustles. When the economy collapsed, I didn't go and there were no jobs available. It wasn't like, well, I guess I can't do anything. I'm going to wait on unemployment. I'm like, well, I got to go start something. Because I just was like, why not me? Like it was just, I never had this inflated view of people that had built businesses. It was always like, yeah, they're just another person and they did that instead of getting a job. It's just someone else. And so I was lucky enough to have that in my past and have that as a viewpoint that I just started looking at what I could build when the economy tanked.
Yeah, and I think that message is really important too, because I think the idea behind this podcast is trying to show that too. Where I've spoken to unicorn founders and they're all people. Like you've been wildly successful, but as you said, you're still a person at the end of the day. Like people listening today, they can't look at you and think, I can never do what he's done, because you can learn from they can learn from you, they can learn from other people. But there's nothing to say that you're always going to be successful when they can't do that. They've just got to think in that way. And it's like I said, it's breaking down those barriers between us and them. We're all the same. We can get there if we have to at least try at the beginning. If you don't try to start something,
you got to swing the bat, as they say. There's a great joke that a guy wakes up every morning and he prays to God, today, please help me win the lottery. And every morning for years he wakes up and prays to God, please help me win the lottery. And after 10 years of every day praying, the clouds open, the sun shines, and God speaks down. You got to meet me halfway and at least buy a ticket. Like, you got to actually take that step for that luck to hit. And people miss that too. Like it's, and don't get me wrong, there's also circumstance. Like a lot of people, it's hard. Like you may not be in a place like, I had the fallback, like a lot of people do. I probably would have never been homeless. My parents would have taken care of me at that level, but I was on my own. I went into a massive amount of credit card debt trying to make different businesses work. By the time I was on my second startup, I was, in not crazy amounts, but I was like 25 grand in debt at 24 years old on a credit card, which is nice interest rate. But I was always confident that I was going to make it out of that and not irrationally confident. I just saw a path that like, if any of these things click, making an extra 25 grand to pay this off won't be a big deal. And I did it very intentionally. I went into debt partially because living expenses, making almost nothing during that period, but partially because I also wanted to live my life as a 22, 23-year-old. And I'd go to the bars or I'd take that once a year trip to Vegas with my friends, even though I couldn't afford it. I'm not saying that this is maybe this wouldn't be the most pragmatic advice to give to a general audience, but at the same time, if you really do have a clear picture of how you're going to pay it off, I don't regret that either, as much as I don't regret going to college. But I also don't fault other people for doing it differently. Like there's people that have done incredibly well without going to college and don't miss it. Because I look at college not necessarily as a time that I learned a lot academically, but a time that I grew up socially. and that I needed to be out there and having fun with friends. And I grew up in a small town, again, a small hippie school. I needed to get out there and do other things. And I absolutely value that and don't think I would have it any other way.
And like you said, there's where people need the basics. They need some kind of level of income. They need to not be homeless. There's the basic level of privilege they need in order to get started in business. But then also, like you said, doing the things that are off the beaten track and going to Las Vegas with your friends, that helps you to understand different kinds of people, right? You meet people, and I think in any business, you've got to understand your potential audience. And if you don't go out and try and meet them, you don't do the things that they're doing, how do you understand them? You're kind of theorizing then rather than actually being like, no, this is what I've seen people act like. And what made you go into marketing in the first place? Like, what chose that path? You're going to create a business.
It really, when I started, so after real estate, I started an online music company, and then I started 2 consecutive subscription e-commerce companies. One was a t-shirt subscription. The other one was a women's activewear brand. And through all of those, it was easy to fulfill the product, like the operational side of the business, whether it was, business coaches for musicians and building a curriculum, or for t-shirts, manufacturing t-shirts and shipping them, and activewear, manufacturing activewear. None of that was that hard. Like, you had to do it. There was work to be done, but like, it was easily solvable. But when it came to sales and marketing, getting people to buy is an ever moving target. It's a constant challenge. And so as the founder, I was constantly focused on that, because you kind of have to focus on the hardest challenges. And at the time, digital marketing was not a ubiquitous thing, and nobody really knew how to play with the internet. I mean, my first company, Fame Wizard, the music one, there were no Facebook ads. And actually, even the second one, Swag of the Month, or t-shirt company, there were no Facebook ads. It just started to come out towards the end of that company before I sold it. And so we were still trying to figure out, like, how do we even get customers to our website? And so I just focused on it and tried things and did things, and had to be super scrappy because I didn't have a lot of money on the second 2 businesses. And actually, more Swag of the Month was really where I got really scrappy. It was bootstrapped, and we just figured out how to drive traffic, how to get people there. And through doing so, then when I went to Ellie, which was the activewear brand, which was out of the incubator that launched Dollar Shave Club. So I joined them, advised on their companies, because I'd sold this e-commerce company, and they were like, come in and help with our other ones, and help them launch this activewear brand. And that's where I had a war chest, but I had been so scrappy the whole time that went really far. And so then I got to kind of do everything I'd been wanting to do with the finances that I needed. And then it worked really well, and we skyrocketed. And that's after building and selling that. We sold it after a year. Then I started advising and consulting, because I was like, okay, so now I know what I know works, and it's worked several times. And so now let's go try this for some other companies. And then, so I consulted for 6 months and saw that my strategy worked for many businesses. It was really, really hard for companies to find decent marketing talent, whether it was other agencies or hiring in-house. It was just 99% of marketers out there are snake oil salesmen. They have no idea what they're doing. And the few that are good tend to get expensive, want long contracts, high minimums, something that makes them hard to work with. And so just got sick of it and hired my own little SWAT team that I'd met through the ecosystem in LA and the e-commerce landscape. And, each with their own expertise, like a Facebook marketer, an email marketer, a web designer, a fractional CMO, et cetera. And just said, hey, everything's a la carte, month to month, cheaper than hiring in-house. The idea is now these companies can spin up what they need when they need it, and ebb and flow and change as they need to. And that was the start of the business. And there was no plan of building something big, but now we actually will turn 8 years old this week, and we're over 300 people, and it's still bootstrapped, and the company's just skyrocketed because we just came on this principle of accessibility to great marketing, meaning let's be super nimble, flexible, easy to work with, cost effective, but the best at what we do. And there's no reason that has to be mutually exclusive. Like, a lot of agencies believe they have to have a high barrier to entry to be good. I'm like, I don't agree. I think you can be a really talented marketer and still work with startups and still work with up and coming businesses.
Yeah. And congratulations on the 8 years and the growth of the business. You said 99% of marketers can seem like snake oil salesmen. Right at the very beginning, how did you convince people that you weren't one of those people? What did you do to kind of distinguish yourself?
This is where timing and luck have a lot to do with it. I had built and sold 2 e-commerce companies, one of which was out of one of the most prolific incubators in e-commerce. So when people saw that I'd worked at Science and I'd built Ellie and I'd built Swag of the Month and I'd sold both, it's like there's no arguing at that point that I obviously know something. And there was no one else that had that story at least in LA. Like, there was no other agency founder that had sold and built great e-commerce companies. A guy that started an agency about a year before me, and we basically were neck and neck till he sold a couple of years ago and decided to bow out, and he just left his agency. But for, what would that be, 6 years, we were kind of neck and neck. He was an affiliate marketing guy that built an agency. And that was really him, and a couple others were competitors. But other than that, most people were just like, I watched a Gary Vaynerchuk video and got motivated to start an agency, or I watched a Tai Lopez video and paid whatever, $2,000. And now he says I'm a social media expert. And so that was generally the landscape. Or it was WPP and Omnicom and Dentsu and these bigger agencies that no small or medium business would ever work with.
Yeah. And in that process of building from like what was originally just you consulting, and then you got your SWAT team, and now you come up to 300 people. How did you find that process as like the founder of the company? Was there growing pains, or was it something quite natural?
Listen, there's as a founder and as an entrepreneur, a CEO, a manager, an executive, the pains never stop. And I think that that's like the falsehood that a lot of people end up causing themselves a lot of undue stress from, is like that once you fix these problems in a company, that it's all going to be good and, rainbows and sunshine. It's like the job of an executive or a leader or a founder is to solve the biggest problems at the company. It trickles up. The bigger the problem, the higher it goes till you end up as the owner with the biggest problems. And early on, those problems are a lot smaller, but you also have a lot less capability to handle the problem. So so early on, the anxiety of them doesn't change until you just learn to deal with them. And so, early on, I mean, there's literally, I don't think there's a week or a month that's gone by without some level of like growing pain or something. And that the start of that is, the root of all of it's always going to be people, whether it's clients, employees, partners, et cetera. Like our business is very people centric. So there's not a lot of other issues that we run into, but I would say the problems early on were more around consistency and predictability. Because when the smaller you are, the less statistics play out. And so it can be volatile. So your business can ebb and flow a lot more. One person leaves in the beginning, it's 20% of my staff. And if they're a senior person, it could be, we had this, a guy bailed on a Monday morning, told me that he was going to Hawaii to marry a girl. There's a lot longer story around this. And he was managing half my clients, and he just bailed like a month into business. And we had no money in the bank because I had like put everything into this. And it was like, half my clients were calling me, screaming at me that their stuff wasn't getting done. And this guy had met a girl over the weekend and decided to marry her in Hawaii. So some crazy stuff like that. Like at the time, that felt like the world was collapsing. And then you learn that that's how it goes. And now, obviously, with 320 people, I don't care if someone goes and marries someone and ditches out on their, like, I shouldn't say I don't care. My business will be just fine if an individual ditches out on their work at this level of people. But now the problems are going to be a lot bigger problems. And to take it to the extreme scale, Jeff Bezos or Tim Cook dealing with Congress accusing them of being criminals, and geopolitical problems and Chinese trade wars and logistics problems and everything being stuck at the port in LA. Like these are all things that don't go away and just get bigger. And, you watch Mark Zuckerberg or even Elon Musk is at war with Congress right now. The guy that literally proliferated electric cars and private space flight is being accused of being a freeloader by Congress. And not to get political, but it's just like, you try to, the bigger you get, the more of a target you have too.
Like with this growth as well, obviously you didn't expect at the beginning to grow that big, I suppose, right? Did you think about the kind of culture and values as you went along, or how did that kind of play out? Because sometimes some people say that they designed it right at the very beginning and the first day, and they knew what they were going to do. Whereas I think often you can kind of learn as you go along.
Yeah. So funny enough, 6 months in, we made like a set of hires that ended. So our first 6 months, like nobody lasted because we were like doing arm's reach hiring, meaning like just you're a friend of mine, you're good at Facebook, come on in. And then it was like it's hard to work with people that don't have like that professional go through the professional path to get into the business. So a lot of them didn't take it seriously, et cetera. So we churned through the people in the first 6 months pretty quick. And I brought on the music company, my first company that I started out of college after real estate. After 2 years, I moved on and hired a CEO to take over. After 3 more years, I started Hawke, and he came over to be originally it was my director of strategy, and he was basically our fractional CMO. And then quickly, because he was having to report on all the work our team was doing, he started running the team and quickly became director of ops, COO, co-founder, partner, et cetera. And he interviewed someone that ended up moving up to be one of the more senior executives we had for years. And when he was talking to her, he was like, listen, if you can get shit done, if you can learn quickly and you're cool, we'll get along like peas and carrots. And then he kind of came to me, he's like, I think those are our core values. Get shit done, learn quickly, be cool. And I'm like, yeah, those resonate. And we never thought much about it. And I think this is important because I think so many people think, including our own team, there's some like, giant study that was done and some ghost in the machine that it's like, this is how we're going to do everything. And this is grandiose vision. No, it was an interview with him with a girl that he was like, yeah, if you can do these three things, we'll be great. And then he said it to me and it resonated with both of us. And then we ended up, putting it up on the wall and making it our thing. It was get shit done, learn quickly, be cool. About 2.5 years ago, COVID throws you off. So yeah, it's about 2.5 years ago, we decided to redo our core values, to update them, to make them more professional. Maybe shit in our core value is a bad thing, et cetera. And we went through this whole process and built these core values that really resonated with what we thought people needed to aspire to be at Hawke, published them. And for 6 months, no one could say them. No one remembered them. No one gave a shit about them. We did not manage to them. I think it was like 3 months into COVID. I was looking at them. I'm like, I still don't even know what the fuck these say. Like, it's like, they're not interesting. They're not exciting. And I'm like, let's just go back to the old ones. And we reverted back and it worked. I will say, like, that period, no one had any idea what our core values were, not because they weren't written on easily defined or anything, but it was like, it went from get shit done, learn quickly, be cool to accountability, adaptability, have fun. Like, and it was this 7 or 8. So again, I can't even, and you can see, like, I wasn't even bought in, but we built them. And like, listen, they all made sense as things we wanted our people to be, but it came back to core. Like, they were all values that we still hold. Like, we want our people to have fun. We want our people to be accountable. We want our people to be adaptable. Like, these are all important things. But back to the core, if they can get shit done, we execute, we complete, we get shit done. You can learn quickly because it's an ever-changing landscape and you got to have smart people that can be quick to adapt. And you're cool, meaning you have empathy, you're social, you can, relate to people. You're actually someone you want to hang out with. Like, then coworkers will like each other, clients will like our people. And if you have those three things, it pretty much covers what we need. Now, there's all sorts of other nuance, but those are the core. And so, we debated get shit done. Like, in a professional organization with hundreds of people, should we have shit in our core values? And it was a fun debate because we ended up coming to the conclusion that, like, listen, if someone's coming in here and is turned off by the word shit, they probably shouldn't work here and they probably shouldn't work with us. Like, you need to be a little less uptight for this culture. That doesn't mean there's not plenty of companies that I respect shouldn't have that as a part, but for specifically Hawke Media and the way we work with all the different types of entrepreneurs and startups, there's going to be some swear words thrown out now and then. I'm not saying that I want it to be a bro culture frat house, but you can't be turned off by a swear word here and there. So keeping it in there to make sure, like, yeah, and it actually works really well because between that and our mission statement, which we did re-articulate, which is accessibility to great marketing for everyone, that we stuck with, those two. When now we articulate those well when people come in, they know what they're walking into. They know what's expected of them. They know what the company's about, what the values are. Like, it just makes it way better for employee retention, satisfaction, because everyone's aligned and there's no misconceptions.
Yeah. And like along those lines, you've obviously spread out geographically now as well. So all of those 320 people aren't sitting in one office together. How did you find that expansion in terms of, you don't see everybody all the time, and with COVID, it has another effect. Were you able to maintain that culture?
Well, that's I think the fallacy that you just said is exactly the problem, is maintain culture. I think maintaining culture is a fallacy. I think it's, another great line from my partner. He's like, it's kind of like trying to maintain status quo in your life, where it's like, you went to high school, you had your high school, period of your life. You have your, let's just say, standards. Like, you have your college period of life, you have your young adult, you have your parenthood, you have grandparenthood, whatever it is. And it's like, if you try to maintain your high school years in college or your college years when you're trying to raise kids, it doesn't work out that well. Like, culture changes. As your company grows, your culture is going to change. And instead of fighting it and trying to latch on to the good old days thing, if you adapt to it and make it work for the time being, it actually works great. And and then you alluded to, there's COVID and there's working remote. COVID's tough because people feel isolated. We've had to do a lot on the mental health side of things, not in terms of like, I almost hate the word because it's not like true mental illness, but like, people have struggled with stress and struggled with anxiety. And there was a weight on everyone, I think, the past 2 years. And there still is. I don't know that it's over yet. So there's that piece, which I think we have to, there's a responsibility to, because happy people are productive people, try to find ways to help people through it is important. But also remote doesn't scare me in terms of culture, because there's again, a trade-off. Like, nobody's commuting anymore. Like, we had people commuting 2 hours each way into work. Like, that is tough. And that sucks. You take that away from someone, that gives them 4 hours a day back. I don't care if they use it for work. Some of them do work a little more, but don't. Go enjoy yourself. Live a life. I remember when COVID, like 2 months in, my brother, who's 9 years younger than me, called me, and he's got some friends that are, some of the more, not junior, but some of the employees at the company. And he's like, hey, like, some of your guys are just like hanging out on the beach at the middle of the day. I'm like, yeah, and those same people are getting glowing reviews from all their clients and handling all their work. Good for them. Like, that's awesome. That could never happen in an office setting, not because of me, like, because I could care less, but because, again, it goes back to the sort of fear of authority. I see it with our employees where like I get on Zoom with all of them, and I tell them all to reach out whenever they have questions. Feel free to hit me up. Maybe 5% of our employees actually reach out to me ever to talk. And I've realized part of the onus is on me to reach out to them. And so I do set times and try to be a part of that. But there's this interesting factor that people do, fear that, which goes to play when you're in an office. They're trying to be present and be, for politics' sake, so to speak. And now there's nothing on them. I get on a Zoom call with them. We handle our stuff. I don't care where they are. And if they're handling their stuff, which our business specifically is pretty outcome focused, where we're able to be like, if your clients are happy and you're performing for them and you're managing the amount of work we need you to, I could care less if it takes you 2 hours or 20, frankly. Like, if you can get stuff done quickly and be productive, great. So it allows for that type of a culture, which I like. The other side of it is you don't necessarily get all that time to like just, the water cooler, hanging out, talking to each other. So you have to be more intentional with that. So like, we're doing things, we don't have to pay for an office anymore. So we flew a bunch of people to Phoenix and had, an evening where we had 3 different teams there, and we have a whole bunch of people in Phoenix now. So we did something there. And then we do an annual trip for the entire company, and we do things that still get people together and build that camaraderie. But there's, again, a lot of benefits to being remote that counteract some of the negatives.
Yeah. And going back there as well, like we said about the culture changing, and that's a good thing, because I think it's a common thing for CEOs as well. It's like, there's a very different role when you start and it's a scrappy company with 10 people versus having 320 people. If you try to manage them the same, then people are going to be unhappy because it's not the same thing anymore.
Well, and I will say, every time you double, there's going to be people that, lack of a better word, don't make it. Like, there's people that are not going to be happy with the new structure of the company and what it entails to double your company. And and so you're probably going to see turnover as you grow.
Yeah. And it's like true as well with the culture changing, because it's a different kind of responsibility. Once you've got to the size you are, then clients have higher expectations. They're always going to be expecting more from a company that's got such a huge backing behind it. Whereas there might be some different leniency or some different expectations around what you're going to deliver when you're at the very start. And you've got to live up to those, because that's what people are paying you for.
That, and it's just, the feeling, it goes back to the, analogy with high school to college, et cetera. Like, a 10-person organization feels different than 20, feels different than 40, feels different than 500. Like, it's just, that's part of it. And certain people thrive in different size organizations, and certain people don't like change. And that's part of it too. So over time, you really have to align with people that want to come along for the growth. And some people might even think they want to, and then the things that come with that. Because at a 300 something person company now, there's a lot of process and procedure, and I hate to say it, bureaucracy. Now, not a lot. We're not that big, but there is some things where it's like, yeah, now every decision I make affects 300 something people. It's different than when we're 5 and we can just change it again. Like, you have to roll things out and take time to train everyone and get people up to speed and make sure that you didn't break something when you change something else. And it just takes a lot more. And so the people that want to move a little quicker than that will get frustrated, and that are used to moving quicker than that. And so it's things like that you also, by the way, I do believe that you have to allow people to move quickly. So fighting that in some ways is important too, and not becoming bureaucratic for the sake of bureaucracy, but again, I remember my partner, when we were 100 people, or 110, I think, I remember the line. I was the guy that was just like, yeah, sure, go. I'd make quick decisions, and I was used to making quick decisions. And finally, I forgot what I let someone do, but it was something crazy. It wasn't that crazy at the time. Someone asked me, like, let's just to say, it was like, hey, do you mind if I take this person to lunch and put it on the company? I was like, yeah, no problem. Like, of course, you're taking a client to lunch, go put it on a company. And then all of a sudden, like, three other people wanted to, and three other, my partner was like, hey, remember whenever you say yes to one person, here you're saying yes 110 times. Just multiply everything by 110. So like, you say, yeah, go ahead and do this, and now 110 people are going to do that. And it was a perspective I didn't have, that I was like, I was just talking to that one person, but you're right. I have to, like, from whether it's fairness or whatever, I'm saying yes to a lot of people every time. And it changed the way I was looking at how much I approved. But again, that also stifles having quick decisions. So you have to be like, well, wait a second, should I do this because it's going to affect all this? And you have to think a little more complexity, which again can frustrate people that are used to the early culture of do it, do it, do it.
Yeah. And like recently you've got the Hawke Method book coming out, and obviously that's something you've built up through Hawke Media, and you've got the vision of how to help grow companies. Is that something which you had right at the very start when you created the company? Or is it through the experience of what's been going on with the company and when you're training new people? Because obviously when you've got 300 employees and you want them all to act in the same, not the same way, but to take care of what you've learned and to make it grow and apply that to customers.
Yeah, no, it's exactly what you just said. It's I had an idea of how to do marketing, but then articulating it so that I could train people to do it and keep it consistent was really what came with Hawke. And it became a methodology that we've had now for 8 years. And so, I feel like we developed the framework around it after about a year. And then I spent years speaking about it, honing it, continuing to build off of it. And then after 6 years, started writing it in a book. So we've been working on the book for 2 years. And so, frankly, met the guy that became my ghostwriter, worked with him, dictated to him, edited with him, and worked, a guy named Jesse Tevlo, and worked with him on putting it together. And I met him at a party, and he was, a book guy. And he's like, have you wanted to write a book? I'm like, I've been thinking about it for a while. We have this methodology. I've spoken at a lot of conferences about it, but I'd love to distill it down into, the framework that we already use it. We talk about it in our training. We talk about it at Hawke, but putting it out to the public, because again, it fits our mission, accessibility to great marketing for everyone. If we can publish this framework that allows people to understand marketing in a much more, simplify it, honestly. The idea is to make it really easy to understand so that people go, it's not this opaque situation for CEOs or marketing managers or marketing students or whoever is trying to get into marketing or to at least understand it peripherally. We wanted to be able to just show, this is what we do. It's this simple. Read this 200-page, easy read book, and you'll have at least a general understanding. And so, the mission is to get it out there. We've already partnered with a bunch of universities on it. We're going to send it to every one of our employees, obviously, though they mostly already know it. But our clients, as they come in, so they understand what we're actually doing, because we also know that one of the biggest points of conflict with our clients is communication gap, them not understanding what we're doing, and that lack of that communication gap. It's not execution. Our team knows how to market things. So that's really rare that we have an issue there. And so, yeah, we're putting it out. It's actually, we pre-launched it. It's on Amazon. It's on hawkemethod.com. It's in Target, Walmart, et cetera, and going for a New York Times bestseller, trying to get 20,000 books sold by the time we launch.
Yeah. And for the people listening today who aren't fully aware of what the Hawke Method is, can you give a general overview and how it could help them to grow their businesses?
Yeah. So, and again, there's a lot more actual tactics and execution in this, but the general idea is it's around what we call the 3 principles of marketing. So awareness, nurturing, and trust. Awareness being, how do you introduce your product or service to a new customer that's never heard of you? So things like advertising, PR, word of mouth. How do you get it out there to new people? And then nurturing, what do you do after they're made aware that you exist to actually get them to buy? Because there's a period there. And this is the biggest thing I see people miss is the idea of a purchase cycle. The first time someone introduced to your product or service to actually when they buy, there's a time period there. And there's all these numbers and spreadsheets in marketing now that everyone forgets that there's just time. And it's 9 women can't make a baby in a month. It takes time. And so so what you do during that time, whether it's email marketing, SMS, content, chatbots, et cetera. And then trust, because 75% of consumers will not buy from a company they don't inherently trust. So doing things to build trust, which early on is third-party validation, influencer marketing, testimonials, reviews, PR, et cetera. And then over time becomes brand. Trust is, becomes ubiquitous synonymous with brand. And if you have a brand people know and are familiar with, that is where they get your trust as well. if you're anywhere in the world and you see a Coca-Cola and you're a Coca-Cola fan, you're probably just going to buy a Coca-Cola. You don't need someone else to tell you it's okay. So,
yeah. Have you got any good any good case studies of like companies that you used it for and you've really seen great results?
yeah, I mean, we've used it for most of our companies because where this comes into play and how this is, practically used is every company we go into, we take a look at what they're doing in marketing and where they're at in their stage of their business and decide where the low hanging fruit is to attack. What do we need to do? Do we need to create more awareness, more nurturing, more trust, all of the above? What's missing? What do they already have accomplished? And, there's a segment of the book where I talk about, like, I walked into a Fortune 500 company that is, in their boardroom was absurd overlooking Central Park. And it looked like, a Victorian palace. Like, it was just crazy. And we're talking about the growth of the business. And they're like, we're doing tons of email marketing and tons of, content. And, we're really, we've got a lot of, a lot of reviews and testimonials and all this working for the business and like, really engaged audience. And I'm like, okay, so you're doing great on nurturing. Sounds like you're doing well on trust. But like, how many new people are you driving in? Like, what advertising you're doing? Although we stopped doing ads, it wasn't worth it. Okay. And so you're not driving any. Are you doing any PR? No. We had a lot of problems with our PR team. Okay. So no advertising, no PR. And like, what's your K factor? Meaning, what's your word of mouth? And they're like, it's pretty low. Like people do tell people, but it's not like that's driving a lot of growth. And I'm like, yeah, usually word of mouth can be slow unless you do something that goes viral, that kind of thing. I'm like, okay, so you're doing absolutely nothing in awareness, but you're nurturing the hell out of it. So you're just taking this existing pile of customers and just continuing to hit them. And inherently at some point, some of those are going to fall off. So your company's not growing, is it? Like, no, we're not seeing a lot of growth. It's like, yeah, because you're not doing anything to grow. You're not filling the top of the funnel. Like, and obviously in this conversation, like, it's as simple as can be. But when people don't have a framework in which to distill this down in a simple way, they get stuck in, well, we're doing all these things, but Facebook didn't work, so we're not going to do Facebook. But email marketing is going great because they're looking at my Facebook ads are getting whatever. Let's say they got a 1x return on ad spend. So it wasn't profitable. It wasn't going well. But when I email my customers, I make 10 times my money because it's cheap. Yeah, it's a very different thing. You're emailing existing audience versus getting new audience. But again, when you don't get into that logic and concept side of things, they're just looking at numbers and purporting to a CFO. And so that's the stuff that this was intended to create, is like, hey, now just use that framework, look at your marketing, make sure you're covering these things. And when you're seeing things not work the way you want to, identify why and what in that framework are you missing and what do you think is causing that? And then you can get into more of the weeds, which we do go into in the book, of then what to use. Is it a time to onboard, Google or Facebook or advertise on TV, or what are the right channels and how do you identify that as well? But yeah, so again, we've used it for everyone, but I more like the situations like it's insane the amount of situations where I see the other side too, where it's like someone's driving in Facebook ads, but doing no email marketing, no SMS, their website sucks, etc. And they keep saying, I can't get Facebook to work. Like, Facebook's working just fine. You're just not doing anything else. Like, they're coming to your website. It's almost as ridiculous of a statement as if you had a store in Times Square and, the millions of people that are flooding through there. And you're like, I just can't get people to walk by the store. They're like, what do you mean? They're all right there. Your problem is your store, not the people. Like, you need to put a sign up. You need to maybe open your door. Like, it's those kind of conversations, but in a digital form that we have.
Yeah. What I think was really interesting too is that you're giving the books to the clients as well. So some people might be worried, I'm going to give away all my secrets. But what I've kind of discovered over time as well is that people often, they might like the ideas and they might be able to execute some of it. But it's always good to have somebody working with you, because you have your biases of when it's your own business and you have your own pet projects. And sometimes you need the outside voice to kind of tell you, like, here, we've got this shared framework, we've got the shared ideas.
Well, it is simple. Like, it's easy for me to tell you, like, okay, so let me look at your, and we do this for free. We'll do an audit for free, and we'll be like, okay, so listen, your conversion rate's this, blah, blah. Let's say we go through all their data and we go, okay, so you need to ramp up Facebook ads because they're working really well. You need to make sure to incorporate email marketing, probably add SMS. Then you might want to redo your website because your site speed's a little slow. You want to add Google probably in a couple months once you scale Facebook a little bit. And then influencer marketing would be great to get some third-party validation. You might want to install Gorgeous to start getting this going. You want to install a couple more apps here. Yeah, you can go do all that. And if you can go do all that, then go do all that. But generally, that's the point is like we get hired for 2 reasons or 3 reasons. We used to joke. Now it's really 2 because we filter the third. Bandwidth, they don't have the bandwidth to do it all. And we're cost effective. Expertise, like even though I just gave them a book on how to do it, they're not an expert. They now have an understanding, which is what I want. Doesn't mean they can do it all really well out the gate. And they're probably going to take a lot more time to do it than we can do it for them. And then the last one we always joked about was, or a punching bag, because it's bizarre, but a small percentage of clients come in. It feels like they're hiring us just because they want someone else to blame or to yell at. And we generally filter those people out before we even get hired these days, but we quickly walk away from them too. Just a bizarre group, category of people that just want to yell at everyone.
How do you filter this out? Because I know a lot of people struggling in the early stages of their business where they're almost desperate to get clients.
Well, that part's fine. I actually don't. Passion and anger, like I should say, like we talk about it, like we will get frustrated clients for the right reason because we also like, we are not the arbiter. And you asked about successful clients. We've had many clients go from zero to billions of dollars with us. Like, so we've had 3,500 companies we've grown successfully. So it's a long list of companies that we've had that have gone incredibly well. But with that, nothing's linear. It goes back to what I was talking about with like, there's always a shit show as a business owner. And sometimes they're going to get on the phone after a bad day and they might yell at our team. And we try to find that delta and try to coach them on being professional. And we talk back and forth and we try to make it a partnership and a relationship. That being said, again, I think it's just, somewhere between 3 and 5% of our society is completely irrational and almost not, so maybe sociopathic. So, and I hate to say it, but it's just a thing I've seen over the past 8 years. And so with that, it pretty quickly you can identify someone that's passionate and, maybe a little stressed out because they're trying to build a business, and someone that's just irrational and not worth it. And we're pretty open to those conversations, and our team knows that because I care about our employees as much as I care about our clients. And it's I would say it's equal. I don't want to say that one's more important than the other. They both make the business run. And so I'm not going to lose a client over a shitty employee as much as I'm not going to lose a good employee over a shitty client. And so it's, we're not. So when we have people that are unkind, and I've had it, I had a great company. We were growing like crazy and things were going really well for them. But the guy could not stop getting on the phone and cussing at the team about stuff that had nothing to do with us. He'd just be frustrated. He'd just yell at our team. Numbers were great. Objectively, everything was good because I'd dive in and because they'd tell me he was yelling. He'd never call me. He'd just yell at the team. And then I called him. I had like 3 different conversations with him where like, you can't talk to my team that way. Like things are going well. I know you want to keep working with us, but you keep doing this, we're going to have to part ways. You got to stop. Second time it happened, I was like, last warning, man, like this is it. Like my team won't be talked to this way. And they knew I was standing up for them. Third time it happened, I was like, so we're done. Good luck. We'll transition out. I'll recommend someone else if you want, but we're not doing this. And, he was shocked. He couldn't believe. So surprising a lot of times to these type of people, because also a lot of people have ego. But you need to run a business that way. And because you need to have your people's back too. And that's an important factor of it. But yeah, in general, we've, seen a lot of success with it, which is fun.
On the meta side of things, have you used the Hawke Method to help you grow Hawke Media itself? And you kind of assess how you grow Hawke Media using your own method too?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I mean, we talk about it. We drink our own punch all the time. So we are constantly looking at our own marketing strategy and where we need to be improving and how we're building awareness, nurturing, and trust, and how we're covering those things. And yeah, the thing is, there's not a lot missing there because we've run from that method from the beginning. But that's why we have one of the most active sales and marketing teams in the agency world. We bring in more clients than almost any other agency in the country on a regular basis because we have this consistency of this marketing funnel that is really powerful.
And with the future now, where are you looking to take Hawke Media as we go into 2022 and beyond?
Marketing world domination. We should be expanding into Europe shortly, meaning potentially this week. We're working on closing an acquisition there. We already expanded in Canada. We are actually building out a strategy for China. We're already working with a lot of Chinese brands, working on a team in the Philippines, all over the US already. I think we're in 41 states last time I heard. Yeah, just continuing to expand and grow, basically build out our capabilities, be better. We also are working on building our own proprietary software around being, leveraging AI for what we do in a way that's not just a marketing, how would I put it? Like a promotional tool, but like actually leveraging machine learning and AI and automation around what we do to make our people more efficient, as well as more consistency of delivery. Because, one of the visions of what I'm trying to create, and we talk about, is like the Deloitte or EY of marketing, where it's like, we're going to do all of the scalable, repeatable, consistent parts of marketing that people miss constantly. And we're going to be that business that makes sure you check all the boxes and you have marketing covered. We might not be the company that's going to hide your money in the Cayman Islands. Like, that's not our goal. It's the high risk, high reward side of marketing. It's the scalable, repeatable side that we can help your business grow predictably. And so building that out has been a big focus of it too.
So you've also written your own book, but what books have inspired you in your own entrepreneurship journey that have helped you along the way?
Favorite one is one that most people don't know of in this world, because it came from the music business. It's a book called Appetite for Self-Destruction by a guy named Steve Knopper that wrote for Rolling Stone for like 20 years, now writes for Billboard. Actually, after I read the book in beginning of 2009, and I recently got in touch with him through Twitter and actually had a conversation with him, because I kept crediting his book on all these podcasts and was like, I should actually reach out to the guy. It's about the music industry's appetite for self-destruction, meaning their inability to adapt as things changed. And so it was always some disruptor that just screwed them over. Like, I remember sitting in a room when I was in the music industry and listening to some of the biggest record execs in the country talking about how we're going to continue to sell CDs. This was in 2009. How we're going to continue to sell CDs and get people to buy albums. It was like, you're not. Like, that's just not going to happen anymore. What are you talking? Like, the iPhone is out. What are you talking about? And so it was those kind of things that you realize, like, that industry has done that. And it's almost every industry, the failure to innovate, and you rest on your laurels. People are afraid of change and afraid of adopting. And so you end up with these companies over time. Like, I forgot what the metric is, but if you look at the Fortune 500, like every decade, like there's a huge percentage that are no longer there or no longer in business because people don't adapt. And so, it's being disruptive to yourself. There was another line from Marcus Shingles, who was the CEO of X Prize, said to me, and I went to a talk of his, and he was talking about, who's going to be the Uber to your taxi company? Like, what does that look like? That's going to be completely disruptive to the way you operate. And if you know it, why aren't you building it? If you don't know it, you better figure it out. And that was kind of a line that he used with a lot of businesses. He was a consultant too, that I thought was just brilliant. If you keep that mindset when you're building a business of who would disrupt me, what would that look like? And we should build it. And we've done that. And so we have our venture fund now where we fund a lot of marketing tech and e-com tech, because it's things that I'm not necessarily a tech guy. I don't know that I would build all these things, but let's be a partner to them and benefit from the growth. And we constantly look at what are other things that could be disruptive that we could just be a partner in or do.
Yeah, well, that sounds great. Exciting for the future there. So it's been a pleasure to talk to you today. I think a listener's going to learn so much from what you've said. If people want to hear more about you and Hawke Media, and obviously buy the book, where can they go?
So for the book, it's Amazon, Target, Walmart, just Hawke Method. It's really easy to find, or just hawkemethod.com. For Hawke Media, just hawkemedia.com. Super easy. We can always do a free audit or anything for a company. Always down to help. And then me, I'm @/Erik Huberman on every social channel. So pretty easy to find.